Hi, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Code Vein, a game that stands to be pretty special to me, as it truly started an addiction in a way. You see, Code Vein was the first Souls-like I ever played, and Souls-like is a genre that I have gotten pretty into in the recent years, playing through all of the Dark Souls games, Elden Ring, Sekiro, and Bloodborne. I fucking love these games, and I think it all started with Code Vein for me. So today I wanted to talk to you about why that is, and why I think Code Vein is well worth exploring, even if you aren't into its art style. So what is Code Vein? Well, Code Vein is the de facto anime Souls. I love what this game has to offer. I love how it looks. I think visually Code Vein is amazing. It's really good looking. However, I think what really takes the cake for me is the world that it's set in. The idea of this post-apocalypse world where blood runs it as a currency for these almost vampire-esque creatures that use blood magic and consume blood beads to live is sort of a really interesting and inspired idea, and I think Code Vein manages to show off a world that looks like that pretty well, and I think that is what really grabbed my attention initially. However, what kept me playing was the satisfying ass combat system. Now, do not get me wrong, this ain't no Dark Souls or Sekiro or Bloodborne. The hitboxes are not nearly as tight. I don't really mind that though. I think the reality is that you can play around most of these games' issue. Because you see, you have multiple different classes to pick from, and not in the traditional Souls class where you can upgrade all your attributes afterwards. No, Code Vein works a little bit differently. You see, every one of these characters have their own class that they play, and you can unlock their playstyle through talking to them. And some you'll have to explore out and find fragments of their memories and help them resource that memories to unlock their class or just their general skills for their class. Each of them having their own backstory, and you'll get to see and experience all of that. Now, the classes themselves, the way that they work, instead of having the stats like a normal Souls game, is that they have the stats, however you can't level them. You do not level the stats in the traditional way. You pick a passive skill that you can apply 4 of at a total, like at a maximum, and that can be anywhere from you do more damage with two-handed swords, which in my case was really good since I played a pure strength build. And then you can also have something like you have more points into strength or dex. And you can sort of swap these around as you wish. Even when you unlock a new class, you can take those other passive nodes from an older class and put it over into the new class that you found. And you can do that only if you've mastered that skill or those passives. Because essentially, you have to master a skill to, well, reuse it. And to master a skill, you just have to kill enemies. It's as simple as that. And it is pretty satisfying. And it opens the world for a lot of build crafting and for a lot of unique setups to be played. Because you can also take things like magic and put it over on a more traditional melee-focused character and so on. Whether or not that would be a good idea, I'll leave up to you. It is, however, really fucking interesting because it allows for so many different playstyles, as you can do the same thing with active skills. Active skills is the replacement for your weapon arts in another Souls game. Essentially, they are these huge abilities that you can do. For me, it was a lot of physical, hit the enemy fast with my two-handed sword type of skills that I had. And different skills can be used with different weapons and different weapon types. Some of them require that you don't use big two-handed swords but smaller one-handed swords, and others requiring that you use a bayonet or a different gun, because there are some old school guns in this game, and I fucking love it. It's really cool, and it's really open for that build crafting interpretation. I also love the NPC system. Essentially, as you go through the game, you'll meet all of these different NPCs and they'll come back to your home base, and then at your home base, you can take that NPC and you can take them with you out into the world as your partner. You do not need a partner necessarily, you can play this game solo, but I honestly don't really think there's a reason not to. I love the partner system. I think it's really nice to have that company, you know, you feel like you're not entirely alone on your journey and all that. I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool. And you can do that with almost every single NPC in the entire game if you complete the storyline. It is pretty cool to see a game that is so focused on that part of it, something which I think is very unique still to Code Vein. As outside of traditional summons, there really isn't a lot of companions to unlock in Elden Ring or Dark Souls or Sekiro, any of those games. Combat-wise, Code Vein very much is another Souls-like. You have your dodge rolls, you have your parries and your backstabs and all of that, and then you also have your active skills. However, I think the combat manages to feel satisfying without being incredibly fucking challenging. Yeah, there are fights in Code Vein that are hard. It's not like this entire game is a fucking breeze. But I will say I think it is categorically easier than something like Elden Ring or another more traditional Souls-like. I think it's a very good entry point for people to get into the Souls-like genre, which is also my entrance point into enjoying it as a whole. As before that, I have played Dark Souls 3, which was just too hard for me at the time. I really did not enjoy my time with it, I did later in life. But Code Vein was really the game that made me realize that I like Souls-likes quite a lot. From the exploration of the different areas to just the combat itself, it was satisfying. I really enjoyed it. Now, when we talk about exploration, it's important to mention that Code Vein is a very traditional Souls-like again in that fashion. You'll be going through each different area, they'll look pretty different, and I really like the visual art style, and if you don't, then you probably won't like it, but I really like it, so I also really love how the different area looks. There's always this sort of ruined world vibe over it, and I appreciate that quite a lot. And I really enjoy the fact that you get to walk through these ruins and you almost get to imagine how they could have been at their height. And all of that is combined with a story that at times can be a little bit cringy, but at times also can be a little bit emotional, dare I say. As there are times where NPCs will have to sacrifice themselves, so where you'll see somebody die and then there'll be this big reveal later. And all of that. It is much more of a traditional storytelling method than what you see other Souls-like approach with, where in a lot of Souls-likes and a lot of Souls games, you'll have to piece the story together yourself. You won't really have to do that in Code Vein. The story itself is pretty well laid out and it's pretty well explained to you, and it's one that I think is worth exploring and seeing yourself. But there is also the calamity of the world and the different events that took place before you play the game, and those things you'll have to go a little bit more out of your way to experience. Most of them are done through memories, which are these fragments that, like I mentioned, will unlock different abilities for your classes, but they'll also contain some lore. And that lore is one that you'll explore in a kinda unique way, where your character gets transported into like the mind's eye, and you'll see these static pictures as you walk through it of what was happening at the time. It is an interesting way of telling a story, but not a good one in my opinion. You can skip these sections entirely if you want to, and I honestly wouldn't blame you, as they can get a little bit boring while you're looking at a static fucking image and walking. It's not the most interesting thing in the world. I hope that in the second game, that instead of having that, they might just have a cutscene or something else instead, where you just can enjoy it instead of you having to walk as well. But like something else that isn't this will probably be preferred. That being said, I do appreciate that they exist, that they are here. Because I think the stories that they are telling are well worth listening to, and I think on the first playthrough, they are super interesting and can be a little bit emotional, especially if you don't mind living yourself a little bit into the story. You have to give it a little bit to receive that bit, but if you do that, then I think there are some genuinely emotional and touching stories in here about loss and hope and like the greatness of humanity and all of that sort of thing. There's a lot here, and I think it is, like I said, worth experiencing at the very least. However, when I'm talking about Code Vein, there is a giant round-shaped elephant in the room. That being the tag of being the Boop Souls game. Of course, there has been people who have mentioned the Boop Souls game and whatnot, and it is clear why. However, I do think the game manages to live a little bit up above that. I think it is more than just that. I do think the developers took it a little bit too personal when they decided to remove the chest of NPCs in Code Vein 2. I think that's pretty funny. But other than that, I don't have a lot to say about it. I think the game does live above that. It is more than just Dark Souls with tits. And I think it is something that is worth experiencing for all of those other reasons other than Dark Souls with tits. I think the customization is really good, it's very in-depth, but I think more so than that, I just love being able to have these social bonds, quote unquote, persona-esque, with the different, NPCs. They'll then unlock me different rewards. So I give gifts to an NPC and it gives up my gift counter. Then I can pick something else. I can pick that weapon and I can learn to fight with that. And I think all of that is really interesting, and I like how it progresses the character. Otherwise, Code Vein is very much a traditional Souls-like. It is not a game that went too far out of its way to be something unique, yet what it has done with the NPCs and so on is unique enough that it stands out. And I think, for what it does well, it deserves to be experienced. My hope is that Code Vein 2 does go a little bit above and beyond in being just weirder and in general way more out there, and it seems like it is from what I can see. But with all of that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I love Code Vein, and it's a game that I really wanted to cover before Code Vein 2, so we could go into Code Vein 2 with the same understanding. Because Code Vein is a game that I think some people wrote off because of the Tit Souls joke that was floating around. But it's a game that genuinely deserves some attention, as it is genuinely pretty damn good. And with all of that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you did all of that, then thank you. And if you didn't, that's alright. And I'll see you either way in the next one. And until then, I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I hope that I'll see you in the next one. Bye.